Hello, and welcome to Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting on episode 5 of Konosuba. If you'd like to watch along, then start watching now. So last we left off, things were pretty darn good, all things considered. You know, they saw off the Headless Horseman, and Kazuma had managed to become some degree of independently wealthy thanks to that whole cabbage quest. Although that said, you know, life still isn't quite stacking up as much as he would have liked. And I guess when you get down to it, he really has nobody but himself to blame. You know, it was just a fit of vindictiveness that sort of landed him in the situation where he doesn't have some legendary sword to help him slay monsters and all that. Now, I think it's very telling that despite Kazuma lending Aqua money to pay off her bar tab, she's still in debt. You know, that's really all you need to know about Aqua. You know, she's saying, I'll work hard this time in regards to a quest. Like, I think at this point, Kazuma should really understand that that's just not true. But the trouble is, or at least the trouble was last time, there aren't really any suitable quests for people of their stature, you know. That Demon King's general moving in sort of scared off all the weak monsters, so, you know, if you want to do a quest, it's gonna end up being a really dangerous one, you know. I mean, case in point, Aqua was trying to take this quest where you have to kill a manticore and a griffin. Like, that's some dangerous business. Manticores, especially, they are nasty creatures. Although, at least, this sort of lake purification quest is something reasonable, you know, well within Aqua's skill set. You know, she doesn't quite understand what she's getting into, but, you know, it's par for the course, really. So I feel like Kazuma's asking a bit of a stupid question here. You know, even if Aqua weren't a goddess of her stature, you know, I feel like just divine cleric type magic could probably do it. You know. Now Kazuma's got a funny idea here. If Aqua does everything herself, then she can have all the money, but you know, it's pretty clear she's not willing to do all the work, especially seeing as how there are monsters. You know, the idea being, ooh, monsters might attack me, and, you know, if she can't handle a giant toad, then, what hope does she have against an alligator, even a normal-sized one? And, you know, the subtitles describe them as brutal alligators, which I'm sure means bigger or nastier than usual. You know, Kazuma's got a bit of an unorthodox idea, but it probably is the best possible thing they could do in this situation. 'Cause, I mean, what's the alternative? Kazuma, Megumin, and Darkness fighting off a bunch of alligators while Aqua sits around? I mean, maybe putting her in a cage is kind of degrading to a degree, but if the alternative is being mangled by a crocodile, I think a cage is perfectly suitable. Yeah, you know, I guess thinking about it, this is also something of an opportunity for Kazuma. You know, he can just leave her there. I mean, I feel like he certainly would be better off without Aqua around as an anchor around his neck. I also find it interesting that, you know, she said this whole process would take 5 hours and she's been sitting in there for 2 hours without much change. You know, I think the idea we're supposed to take away from this is that Aqua's mere presence is enough to begin purifying the lake, but at the same time, surely there's something she could actively do to speed up this process, you know? I feel like, even though she's ostensibly safe inside the cage, just sitting in a lake for 5 hours would be, you know, rather boring at a minimum. You know, I feel like, I'm not quite sure why everybody's volunteering this information. And I guess the worst part is that Darkness, she's trying to, really insist, you know, to the point where it's just an obvious lie. You know, it's obvious in every instance, but, I feel like Darkness almost wants to be called out about it. Yeah, you know, I feel like Megumin is really poking the bear, or the alligator in this instance. You know, just saying like, boy, none of them have showed up yet. That's, it's bound to cause trouble, and, yeah, those things are gnarly, alright. I hope that cage is sturdy for Aqua's sake. Yeah, see, now she's actively trying to purify the lake. It's almost like she could have been doing this the entire time and maybe she wouldn't be stuck in that cage right now. Oh dear. That is something, you know, having the cage be death rolled by an alligator. I think what really seals the deal about all of this is that Darkness is very clearly jealous. Oh man. Yeah, you know, maybe Cosmo could sort of kill two party members with one stone by sending in Darkness to take some of the heat off of the cage. Wow. You know, that's certainly a difference Aqua made. You know, it only took 7 hours and the cage was merely almost destroyed. It's a good thing it held up in the end. I guess as unlikely as it seems, I do feel a little pity for Aqua. But ultimately, it was her idea to get into this mess. Yeah, you know, this is uncharacteristically nice, I suppose. Everybody giving her their share of the reward. I mean, it is true they didn't do much aside from sit around, but to forego any of the reward money. Oh dear. You know, if there was any sort of indication that Aqua would always be like this from now on, you know, I think it'd be reasonable to feel pity for her, saying stuff like, ooh, the world outside the cage is too scary. But like, come on. I feel like even a casual watcher should understand that this is not how things will continue. Now, I guess just to rub things in a little bit, you know, this is what Kazuma could have been. This guy right here with his fancy sword and armor. Although, this guy, he thought Aqua was a lovely goddess and all that, so clearly he can't be an intellectual powerhouse. Granted, he hasn't had to interact with her too much, you know. Aqua, she's like that Roald Dahl excerpt, you know, where it talks about how actions translate to outer beauty. And, the way Aqua acts makes her pretty darn ugly sometimes. Now, sometimes foreshadowing is fairly subtle, but I think it should be pretty obvious that, you know, showing off this guy right now and sort of making a note of how much he admires Aqua. I think it's not a stretch to say that he will take umbrage at Aqua being kept in the cage, even if it is what she wants. Or, at the very least, thinks she wants. Although, come to think of it, this guy actually does add a new wrinkle to the plot. Because the idea here is that Aqua's stuck until the Demon King is killed one way or the other. You know, if this guy manages it, I'm not sure if that'll, I guess, fix things. Now, this is something of a pattern I'm beginning to notice where somebody in public acts in such a way that, you know, earns the umbrage of the townsfolk. First, there was that bit with the slime from the frogs. Now, Aqua's singing a sad little dirge about being taken to be sold. I mean, frankly, it would be a stupid person that would buy her in the first place. But, you know, she's simultaneously singing this sad song and saying, you know, I don't want to leave the cage. I like it inside my cage. Oh, dear. Now, that's actually fairly remarkable that this guy was able to sort of bend the bars like that. Granted, they had been weakened by those alligators, but at the same time, they hadn't managed to do what he just did. Man, you know, just like that, just being reminded of her status sort of perks her back up. You know, that's really all it took, just sort of indulging her a little bit. I guess there's something to be said for that, you know. She's simple enough to, I guess, bounce back from otherwise what would be a horrible incident. It's also kind of telling that she doesn't really remember this guy very much at all. You know. I mean, this really does sort of encapsulate her horrible attitude to what was her job. You know, this guy is supposedly special and all that, but as it turns out, none of the people who get reincarnated are really special, except Kazuma in the sense that he managed to entirely upend her life. Now, speaking of upending, this guy, you know, he no doubt thinks poorly of Kazuma for everything that's happened, regardless of whether or not it was his fault. You know, this whole quest idea was Aqua's idea, but at the same time, you know, clearly it's all Kazuma's fault for influencing her and being a negative influence. Yeah, Kazuma makes a good point. If only this guy knew. If he knew what Aqua was like, he wouldn't be acting like he is right now. And I guess this is part of the problem. Aqua's divulging the horrible nature of her living conditions without really explaining that it's kind of her own fault in part for being useless. So I think this is where this guy really starts overstepping his boundaries. He's making it sound as though Kazuma's making Aqua sleep in the stables. When in truth, it's really kind of her own fault for being in debt and spending money on stupid stuff. Like, these are problems that can be fixed. And for what's more, this guy, he's also trying to poach the party too. I guess it seems like they might not go for it. Yeah, I guess the real issue here is that Kyoya assumes all of these people are competent, which is certainly not the case. I guess this is sort of the problem with being like the big chosen hero, If it kind of goes to your head, then you start not taking no for an answer. It is an interesting juxtaposition, these two. On the one hand, you have Kazuma, who's essentially making the best of a bad situation. He knows he's hopelessly outmatched, so he has to do whatever he can to win, regardless of how underhanded it is. And, he's doing that in terms of this duel and just life in general, whereas this guy, Kyoya, he's essentially had everything handed to him, and therefore feels entitled to, poach party members, just by asking, no offer of compensation or anything like that. Now, of course, it's only natural that Kyoya's party members call him a coward and a thief for taking the sword, but, it's really only fair. The spoils of war and whatnot. Now, it's interesting that the party members are acting so bellicose. It was Kyoya who initiated this whole conflict. Now, Kazuma, he can't help himself, He has to, he has to give them fair warning that he is a true advocate of equality, and that, he's not above hating women. Oh man, he's definitely playing it up just for effect, to get him to go away. Man. It's very telling that Megumin reflexively protects herself. So, all's well that ends well, right? Well, as it turns out, the answer is not quite. Aqua, even in spite of the quest, she's still having a rough go of things. It turns out, there is the fee for breaking the cage and the fee for repairing the cage. And, man, it just so happens that the two fees match the reward she would have earned otherwise. Oh no. Feel bad for Kazuma. He's really stuck with a bad reputation for not only stealing underwear, but also for covering girls in slime. Like, that's such an innocuous thing to say, really. But... oh, man. I mean, I guess it's fortunate that Kazuma doesn't have to do anything now. You know, Aqua's rightfully upset at Kyoya. It's also interesting that she was padding the number of, or the amount of money that she needs to be compensated, you know. Isn't that interesting with Aqua? So here's the real wrinkle, you know, the guy, he'll settle for just taking his sword back as if he has any right to that at all. But, Kazuma sold it. Whoops. So, you know, at least Kazuma seemingly got a pretty penny for it, but on the other hand, it's gotta suck for that guy. You know, his life, which presumably been pretty good up until now, has now been entirely upended. I mean, if you think about it, if he had a nice little cursed sword to carry him through everything, what skills has he meaningfully developed, really? You know, if nothing else, Kazuma's sort of learned to survive the hard way. You know, that's not to say things have been particularly hard. You know, he's not out in the wilderness surviving or anything like that, but he is managing in his own way. So if that weren't enough excitement for one day, there's now another public announcement with Kazuma being called out in specific. You know, that's never a good thing when you get called out by name. And I guess it's never a good thing when the Headless Horseman from before shows up again. It's interesting that he's upset that nobody's showing up to the castle now. You know, I guess the idea here is that they are dishonorable for not taking up his invitation. Alright, well that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one. See you, Space Cowboy.